To really wrap our heads around what we're talking about here, let's start with a story our source shares about a woman named Fatima. So she and her husband move into a brand new neighborhood in Lahore. Now, keep in mind, they have literally never been there before. But the moment she steps into the area, this strange, heavy feeling washes over her. She looks at the first house, turns to her husband and says, "I know the next house on the corner is yellow, and there's a tree right beside it." And her husband is just stunned, because she was perfectly describing a place she had never physically set foot in. You know, she wasn't entirely wrong, but she wasn't entirely right either. She was experiencing something deeply profound.
What Fatima experienced is, of course, what we call déjà vu. It's a French term, and it literally translates to already seen. It's that eerie, overwhelming sensation that a currently unfolding event, a conversation, or a physical place has somehow already been experienced in the past. Now, it's incredibly common, but you might be surprised to learn that it remains fiercely debated. Actually, today there are over 40 different theories trying to explain it, and none of them completely agree. It's honestly just an awe-inspiring puzzle. And it's fascinating just how long we've been chasing this mystery. If we look at the timeline here, the term was actually coined way back in 1886 by a French philosopher named Émile Boirac. Fast forward to 1950, and you have neurosurgeon Wilder Penfield literally trying to trigger it medically in Montreal using electrodes. Then, jumping up to 2014, brilliant minds like theoretical physicist Michio Kaku were discussing it in the context of parallel universes. So yeah, modern science and medicine have thrown absolutely everything at this.
Section 1. The Scientific Lens. 3 Cognitive Theories.
All right, so the first scientific theory is known as dual processing. I want you to think of your brain as running on 2 parallel tracks. You've got a perception track that takes in the present moment and a memory track that logs it. Normally, these two run in perfect, seamless sync. But this theory suggests that every now and then, there's a millisecond timing glitch. Basically, one track arrives just a tiny bit late. And because of this slight wiring error, your brain gets confused. It flags this brand new incoming information as something that has already happened.
Then we have our second theory, which is the hologram theory. This idea suggests our brains store memories kind of like holograms, meaning you only need one tiny fragment to recall the entire picture. So, imagine you walk into a brand new restaurant and you spot a specific tablecloth. That tablecloth might subconsciously perfectly match the one at, say, your grandmother's house. Instantly, your brain triggers that warm, massive wave of familiar memory, but crucially, without the exact identity attached to it. So the whole place just feels familiar, even though there's no way you've ever been there.
The third scientific theory we're looking at is divided attention. Picture this. You walk into a room, but for just a split second, you're distracted. Let's be real. You're probably looking down at a text on your phone. Well, while your conscious mind is distracted, your subconscious mind is still actively recording the room. A literal second later, you look up and consciously process that room. Your brain instantly goes, "Hey, wait, I've seen this before." And technically, you have, just a second ago, subconsciously.
So the really crucial point here is that science has actively tried to map this physically in the brain. Remember Wilder Penfield from our timeline? Well, in 1950, during a brain surgery where the patient was completely awake, Penfield stimulated a specific part of the brain called the temporal lobe with a tiny electrode. And guess what? The patient immediately felt a wave of déjà vu. It was literally déjà vu on demand. This was a massive medical breakthrough because it linked the phenomenon directly to the temporal lobe. In fact, patients who suffer from temporal lobe epilepsy often experience intense déjà vu right before a seizure, right when that specific area of the brain misfires.
But here's the thing. You can't fully understand déjà vu without looking at its twin, jamais vu. While déjà vu is when the completely unknown feels deeply familiar, jamais vu is the exact opposite. It's when something deeply familiar suddenly feels completely alien. Have you ever stared at your own hands for so long that they start to look totally bizarre, like they literally belong to someone else? Or maybe you've written your own name 20 times in a row until the letters look completely absurd? That weird, unsettling feeling? That is jamais vu. Now, before we move past the scientific lens, our source notes a really mind-bending idea from the theoretical physicist Michio Kaku. He pointed out that in quantum physics, there are theories involving parallel universes and vibrating waves. He actually suggested that déjà vu might happen when you've lived a moment in a parallel universe, but, and here's the catch, Kaku himself admits that we are what's called decohered. Basically, we operate on totally different frequencies, kind of like a radio stuck on the wrong station, so we cannot actually access or interact with these alternate realities at all. And this perfectly builds to the source's main critique of the scientific consensus. The core problem they present is this. Science measures the physical, right? The testable.
But if déjà vu is just a random glitch or a temporal lobe misfire, why isn't it completely random? Why is it so incredibly specific? Think about it. When it happens, you don't just feel generally confused. You feel like you know exactly what someone is going to say next. You recognize specific room layouts. It just feels far too precise to just be a random electrical error. Section 2. The spiritual lens. The realm of souls.
So, shifting gears, our source draws a really fascinating parallel between 7th century scripture and 21st century science. According to the Quran, specifically in Surah Al-Isra, when people asked about the actual nature of the soul, the response was that mankind has been given very little knowledge about it. And the source points out how this 1400-year-old text perfectly aligns with modern science's admissions today. Just like top neuroscientists and physicists freely admit they can't fully explain consciousness or the mechanics of the soul, the theological text establishes right up front that our understanding of this wondrous realm is just inherently limited.
To explain déjà vu, this theological framework introduces a concept called alam arwah, or the realm of souls. According to Surat Al-Araf, before any human was physically born on Earth, all souls were created and gathered together in this specific dimension. In this massive gathering, they interacted, they existed in environments, and they witnessed their creator. This is a foundational premise for this perspective, the idea that your soul existed and experienced things long, long before your physical brain was ever even formed. The source elaborates on this by using a famous hadith which describes these pre-birth souls almost like an assembled army or a gathering of soldiers. The basic idea is that souls who were close or who knew each other in that pre-birth realm will naturally recognize each other when they finally meet physically here on Earth. Modern psychology might just call this personality compatibility, sure, but this theological lens frames it as true spiritual recognition. It explains that instant, unexplainable connection you feel when you meet someone for the very first time, yet you feel like you've somehow known them your whole life. Okay, so the absolutely crucial point of this entire synthesis is the idea of a dual memory system running inside you right now. On the one hand, you have your physical brain memories. These are the tangible records stored in your hippocampus, what you've eaten, where you've traveled, what you've done in your physical body. But running completely parallel to that are your ruh, or soul memories. These are the ancient records of the spiritual realm, the people and the environments your soul experienced back in Alam Arwah before you were ever born. Let's break down exactly how this framework explains déjà vu happening in real time. Step 1. Your physical brain memories and your spiritual soul memories are running silently parallel to each other. Step 2. You walk into a room, or maybe you hear a phrase, and that physical moment perfectly matches a dormant, ancient memory that your soul holds from the pre-birth realm. Step 3. In a fraction of a millisecond, the physical wiring of your brain briefly intersects and touches the soul's memory. Science calls this a temporal lobe misfire, right? But this theological framework calls it a moment where your physical consciousness gets a lightning-fast glimpse of your soul's ancient memory. And what's super interesting is how this framework easily illustrates jamais vu as well. If déjà vu is the soul's memory bleeding into the physical world, jamais vu is the exact reverse. Remember, the soul predates the physical body. So when you stare at your own hands and they suddenly look incredibly alien, the framework suggests this is a moment where the ancient soul is literally looking out through the physical body's eyes. Because the soul existed way before the body, the physical world and the physical flesh temporarily feel like a completely strange, unfamiliar concept to it. The source then connects all of this to another really well-documented trigger for déjà vu: sleep. Surah Az-Zumar implies that during sleep, the soul partially leaves the body, traveling near a spiritual boundary known as barzakh, and then returns to the physical body upon waking. And what's so fascinating here is how this theological concept perfectly aligns with scientific observation. Researchers have actually noted that people experience déjà vu most frequently in the morning, right after waking up. Science suggests this is just because the brain is groggy and the memory systems aren't fully synced up yet. But the theological framework says it happens in the morning because the soul is still transitioning back from the spiritual realm. The door between the physical and spiritual just hasn't completely closed yet, allowing those ancient memories to temporarily slip through into your morning consciousness.
Which brings us to our final takeaway for today. The source material argues that every human has a spiritual void that money, fame, or relationships simply cannot fill, because that void fundamentally belongs to the realm of souls. So it leaves us with a really profound question to chew on. Is déjà vu just a random neurological glitch? Or, as the synthesis suggests, is it a brief, lightning-fast echo of a pre-birth existence? a momentary signal reminding us of an ancient spiritual reality we've simply forgotten. Well, it certainly makes you think differently the next time you feel that sudden, undeniable way of a familiarity. Thank you so much for joining us on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.